right, hello and welcome everybody to the Better Buildings, Better Plants Summit, which is a virtual leadership symposium this year. I'm really excited to get started with this session. So next slide, please. Today we're going to be talking about early best practices from the Waste Pilot, which is a wonderful initiative that's been new to Better Buildings this year. I want to welcome all of our Waste Pilot participants that are on this call. But I also really want to welcome the many, many new voices that we're going to have in the room that are showing an overwhelming interest in waste management. Before we get started, I have just a couple of housekeeping items that I'd like to go through. The first is that this webinar is going to be recorded and archived in the Better Building Solution Center. So if you miss anything, you'll be able to check back with us or share with a colleague. Also, all of our participants are in listen-only mode, which means that you're currently muted and won't be able to change that. However, if you have any issues that come up with tech or with your audio, you can welcome to go to the chat function that's on the bottom of the Zoom screen, and you're going to go ahead and chat to the tech assistant or a panelist, and we'll get you set up. All right, next slide, please. Well, as you can probably tell, I'm your moderator, Hannah Debelius, and I'm in the Building Technologies Office at Department of Energy. And I'll also be joined today by my colleague, Bruce. Bruce, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks, Hannah. So, as Hannah said, I'm Bruce Lung, also known as Robert Lung, and I'm a Senior Technical Advisor in the Advanced Manufacturing Office supporting the Waste Reduction Pilot.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Bruce. You'll be hearing from him a little bit later. Next slide, please. This is our agenda for today. We're going to start out with just some introductions and a program overview, especially since we have so many new faces on the line with us today. Then we have an excellent panel set up of Mark and Bill, who are both representing the commercial and the industrial side of the Waste Pilot. So they'll have lots of wonderful things to share with you. And finally, at the end, you're going to have an opportunity to ask questions of our panelists through a Q&A and discussion. So without further ado, let's get started with the next slide, please. I want to give a special welcome again to our 30+ partners that have joined the Waste Pilot. We are very fortunate to have them really across all sectors. Of course, you can see we have an industrial and manufacturing sectors represented. And then within commercial, we have commercial real estate, multifamily, retail, and healthcare. So thank you again for all of our pilot participants that our early results are going to be based on. Next slide, please. This is just a little bit of an overview of the pilot. It was launched last year at the Better Building Summit for those of you that joined us in Virginia last year. And we're committed to help partners develop and work on their goals, determine their metrics, validate those results, and also, as always, convene partners around solutions and advancing the knowledge base here. Currently, the pilot is closed to new full participants. However, if you'd like to get involved, you can still audit the pilot with us. And by reaching out to Bruce or myself, we're happy to add you to that list so that you can join quarterly calls, get our monthly newsletter, and be in communication with all of our pilot participants. And Bruce and I will have our contact information listed at the very end of this presentation. Next slide, please. So Bruce and I are also joined by a whole team of people that work on the Waste Pilot. We have myself, Andrea, and Zach all work on the commercial side. And over on the industrial side, supporting those manufacturing partners, is Bruce, Eli, Ethan, Kate, and Clifton. So for those of you that are in the pilot, these names probably are all looking familiar to you because we've been working collaboratively with this cross-sectoral approach. Next slide, please. If this is not your first Better Building session, hopefully you're getting used to this tool, but we'll be using Slido to do both a couple of polls to keep us engaged and learn from you all, and also accept questions for our panelists that we'll be doing at the end. So at any time, you'll be able to toggle in between those questions for our panelists and also the polls. So right now, you could open up a new browser or your mobile device and go to slido.com. You're going to enter the event code BB Summit. And then from a drop-down, you'll select the early best practices from the Waste Pilot. So I'm going to give you just a couple of seconds to go ahead and bring that up now. It'll make things a lot easier going forward. And there's also some more directions for that is in the chat box in case you miss it. So while you're bringing that up, next slide, please. I also want to encourage you to engage with us on social media. You can follow both Better Buildings and Better Plants with their Twitter handle. We're using the hashtag BB Summit 2020. And of course, you can also engage with us and share this knowledge over LinkedIn. Excellent. Without further ado, we are going to go to our first poll. So again, this is on slido.com with the event code BB Summit and the early best practices from the dropdown. And just to get started, we'd love to see what industries are represented in the room today, the virtual room, that is. All right, a lot of industrial, that's great. Of our 30 partners, a little bit more than half are from the industrial sector, so I'm glad to see you all tuning in. Mark, that'll be a lot of pressure on you to deliver some great resources to them. All right, contractors, local government. Excellent. So far, this is lining up a little bit with our partners in the program, which is wonderful. I don't know we have many other voices in the room. Excellent. Yeah, contractors. Great. I'm going to go ahead and launch our second poll then so we can dive a little bit deeper. So the next one is going to be a word cloud. So if in just 1 or 2 words, you could let us know what challenges you're currently tackling in waste management. Yes, measurement. I'm not surprised to see measurement, the first one in there. We know that data and measurement, it remains a really huge challenge, both getting it and making sure that it's accurate. Yeah, contamination, that's another big one. Yeah, data accuracy. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of themes here around the data and around contamination. Yeah, also, yeah, measurement of emissions. That's a big thing for those of you pursuing scope 3. Verifying, recycling. Excellent. I'm going to give that just a couple more seconds to populate before I go to our next poll. A recycling center not accepting contaminated waste, that's definitely a challenge and of course can also affect results whether or not you get that data back from the recycling center. Packaging, that's I know one that's a big focus, especially in our industrial sector. All right, great. Thank you all so much. I think that a lot of these we're definitely going to be tackling during the session today, and it's also great feedback for us as we move forward in the pilot. So thank you all so much for your responses. And we do want to just launch one more poll here, which are, what are the challenges to setting and measuring a reduction or diversion goal, since we know that the data and measurement can be such a challenge. And yeah, great. Looks like Sarah, you're already showing the live results for that. Cost, okay. Yeah, the lack of data for sure. We do know that it can be very difficult to set a baseline, and your regional facilities might also be shifting or changing while you're working on those goals. Yeah, lack of local facilities. We know that that's definitely a particular problem for those of you trying to compost. Cost, yeah, definitely can be a regional issue as well. I know Bill is in San Francisco, and so they have a little bit different cost analysis than others, so maybe he'll talk on that. All right, excellent. Well, it's looking like data and data accuracy remains a big challenge in the room, so I'm hoping we can tackle that a little bit more today. Great, thanks so much, Andrea. And you can close down that poll and shift back over, and we're gonna get into speaking about some of our actual early results. So for those of you in the pilot, you know that the first thing we did is interview all of our partners in the pilot to really learn about, you know, where you are in this process and what's on your mind. So from those interviews, we have a couple of insights. We know that many partners already have goals and have started waste efforts to reduce or mitigate waste impacts. We also know, of course, as we've already seen in these polls, that accurate data remains a really large challenge. However, about half of our partners are already, more than half are already tracking their data. And we'll also share that the most common measurement and the most common goal was a diversion goal. And again, for those of you that might be new to our waste management discussion, diversion is the percentage of waste that is not going to landfill. So that diversion is often, it's measured by a percentage, and most of our partners are choosing to calculate that based on weight as opposed to volume. However, we do have a couple that are also using volume. Excellent. Well, I'd like to share some more findings. So we can go to the next slide, please. Of our pilot, so again, we're just in the first year here, about a third of our partners were able to submit waste data to us. So a lot of these conclusions are based off of that. Of those partners, about half of them had diversion rates that are above 50%, which is really interesting, and it shows that we can learn a lot from these partners. Additionally, outreach and education seem to be the most popular mitigation effort that people have undertaken so far. I know Bill's going to talk a little bit more about that today, but across commercial and industrial, that outreach to occupants and employees does seem to be a popular effort, although one that people are struggling with. We also know that a few of our partners have been involved in energy recovery, and we're interested in exploring that more. The graphs on the right just show us that the total diversion for all partners is 41% right now. And for the bottom graph, which is in the commercial sector, we saw that the highest rates of diversion were with our city, our public partner, and then second to that was with office and retail spaces. So there's also probably more we can learn from those spaces that might translate elsewhere. Excellent. Next slide, please. I'm very happy to say that we do already have a couple of resources out there available in the Better Building Solutions Center. And in fact, two of ours were authored in part by our panelists on the phone today. So I hope that in addition to hearing from them today, you'll check out those solutions on the Better Building Solutions Center. Again, these slides will be available and recorded on the Solutions Center after the fact, so you can go back and click these links if you're interested in learning more or catching up and listening to our previous quarterly webinars. Great, thank you. So as far as next steps for us in this pilot, in alignment with the spirit of the Better Buildings and Better Plants program, you can expect us to continue collaboration between these partners and, developing and pushing new resources to the Better Building Solutions Center. That's still going to be our hub for information. And of course, being Department of Energy, there's also going to be an increased exploration at the Waste Energy Nexus, us learning from our partners about what they're doing there, exploring that in our own space with DOE's resources, and hopefully also tackling a lot of the challenges that we're hearing from partners along the way. So with that in mind, I'm actually hoping for a little bit of feedback about what resources would be the most useful to you. So Andrew, we could go ahead and launch that next poll. And again, to participate in the poll, you're going to go to slido.com and you're going to do the event code BB Summit. You're going to have this memorized later. And then you're going to select the early best practices from the waste pilot from the dropdown. So what research, resources, and tools will be most helpful to you all in your effort to mitigate waste? And this could be something that you think DOE could provide, or something that maybe you're looking for from another partner. Educational tools. Interesting, I'm interested to know if that's for the building operators or educational tools for occupants or employees. Connections to recycling vendors, that's definitely something that's a challenge regionally. Checklists and guidelines, absolutely. And I think some of those you can actually see in Shorenstein's Solution at a Glance that we published already. They share some of their guidelines and also some of their education materials. Yeah, compost definitely is a challenge, absolutely. It's also the thing that's, I think, the most new to most building occupants, so that can be a challenge and create a lot of contamination. Consistent messaging. All right, great. I can give that just a couple more seconds to get your feedback before I move to the next one. Excellent. Uniform signage, absolutely. Great. Well, thank you all so much for your feedback. We do just have one more poll before I turn it over to Bruce. So you go ahead and launch that, Andrea. So we know that a lot of pilot partners are taking on waste audits or hiring a third party to do those waste audits. So if that's something that you're doing, what sort of information is included in that? And I believe on this one, you can select all that apply. So it could be that you're getting all of this information. Yeah, definitely the granular categorization of items is the real basis for a waste audit. Okay, interesting to see that the cost is a little bit lower and energy recovery estimate is the lowest. That's definitely something that we're looking to explore more through this pilot. Great, I'm giving just a couple more seconds here for people to share their responses. All right, excellent. Well, thank you all so much for this feedback. And without further ado, I'm actually going to turn this over to my colleague, Bruce, who's going to speak a little bit more about some current work, and then we'll get into our wonderful panelists for today. So, Bruce, go ahead and take it away.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Hannah. I would like to reiterate a warm welcome to everyone who is attending. The Better Buildings, Better Plant Summit is a great occasion. We're really glad to see so many partners from around the country who have joined this and other sessions earlier in the week. I'm going to go through a few slides that discuss how the DOE's Advanced Manufacturing Office is contributing to waste reduction. First, on the partnership side, we have about 20 Better Plants partners from a variety of sectors who are in the pilot. We've begun working with them to understand how they monitor, track, and assess waste reduction in their plants. So far, we've noted that a fair number of them are using the waste diversion as their metric, but we've also seen some absolute reduction, volume reduction metrics, as well as metrics around reuse and energy recovery. We've also collecting a lot of best practices from within sectors and within individual partner companies. One good example is the principles of green chemistry from the American Chemistry Society that we have here today. This was actually forwarded to us from Bristol Myers Squibb, which applies these principles in their waste reduction efforts. And then lastly, we are working with AMO's Strategic Analysis Group to learn from some of their sectoral studies of waste generation to understand waste and energy flows and possible opportunities for improvement. Next slide, please. So we've been doing a lot of work in terms of analyzing and contributing to circular economy. Beyond the work with our partners, AMO is doing a lot of analysis, particularly through data analysis, modeling, but as well as finding existing best practices, technologies, and materials that can impact waste reduction, as well as some sectoral impact analyses. One question we're asking or examining is whether there's going to be a revolutionary approach needed to take place so that some of the inner loops, such as designing for longevity, can be more successful. Some companies have strategies around them already. We've seen that with Xerox and Caterpillar equipment companies. But some companies are also looking to identify ways to reuse recycled materials as inputs or streamline the supply chain to bring them quality recycled materials. One good example of this has been Patagonia so far. Another question that we're examining is how strategies for designing or for reuse or material recovery can take hold. We're looking at a range of practices and technologies such as waste-free culture that we've seen in Japan, zero waste to landfill approaches that identify the product's value at the end of life, and as well as recycled clothing, additive manufacturing, and materials as a service. We are looking at the manufacturing sector in particular as we feel it's going to be a key to the success of any of these different strategies since they provide the pathway for these products to come to the market. Next slide, please. One of the examples of the work that AMO, the Advanced Manufacturing Office, is doing is in the special area of emphasis with respect to plastics. On November 21st of 2019, the DOE launched what's called the Plastics Innovation Challenge. The objective of which is to dramatically reduce plastic waste and to position the United States as a leader in advanced plastic recycling technologies. The PIC, as we call it, is intended to be a comprehensive and coordinated effort that spans fundamental and applied research that takes advantage of capabilities within the national labs, academia, and industry. DOE will use a variety of funding opportunities, partnerships, and other programs to achieve the goals of the Plastics Innovation Challenge. Next slide, please. So through this Plastics Innovation Challenge, DOE is going to advance the basic and applied research to enable polymer upcycling and circular life cycle to achieve Plastics Innovation Challenge objectives. A good example of this is going to be reverse engineering, so they can deconstruct existing plastic products, find out what the base products are that we can reuse or remake, but also looking at design of new polymers and plastics, resins and stuff that can be easily recycled or reused once their initial life cycle or initial purpose is done with. Next slide, please. To help achieve the goals of this Plastic Innovation Challenge, the DOE is going to be partnering with a variety of stakeholders to perform cross-cutting, gap-filling, and corporate analysis associated with the research, development, demonstration, and deployment of EERE technologies across DOE, other government agencies, and external stakeholders. Next slide, please. A great example of this is what we call the bio-optimized technologies to keep thermoplastics out of landfills and the environment, or the Bottle Consortium. The Bottle Consortium has completed an assessment of the current economics, market sizes, supply chain energies, and greenhouse gas emissions associated with 19 major commodity plastics. This work establishes the baseline for economics and supply chain energy for all proposed work in this consortium for fiscal year 21 through 23, and feels the need for baselining for the broader community. Bottle's leadership so far has established key partnerships and structure for the consortium and is reaching out to industry to expand its membership. One big difference between partnership in a program like Better Plants versus Bottle is that in Better Plants and Better Buildings, companies join to get technical assistance, recognition, and networking opportunities. However, when a company joins a Bottle or a consortium like it, it's really more for the opportunity to perform research and to benefit from the consortium's research efforts. So we encourage folks to go to the Bottle's website there, www.bottle.org, and learn about what they're doing. And if you're interested, about opportunities to partner with this consortium. Next slide, please. So now we're going to get to our panelists. I'm going to introduce Mark Pannell from Volvo Group North America. And when Mark finishes, Hannah is going to jump in and we'll introduce Bill Whitfield from Shorenstein Properties. Next slide, please. So Mark Pannell is the Environmental and Energy Manager for the Volvo Group Trucks powertrain production facility located in Hagerstown, Maryland. That means they make engines and transmissions for big trucks. He has over 30 years of experience in environmental and energy issues. He manages the ISO 14001 Environmental Energy Management System, as well as the ISO 50001 Energy Management System at this site. This includes participation in the DOE's Better Plants Challenge program, as well as the North American Powertrain Performance Commitment to Volvo Group's global participation in WWF. At his current position, Mr. Pannell is found constantly initiating and supporting energy and waste reduction projects to exceed this facility's goals. Since joining the Hagerstown facility in 2013, he has helped achieve a total improvement in energy intensity of over 28%. Mark Pannell also promotes and utilizes Maryland's Energy Rebate Program, and since 2016, he has procured over $1.2 million for the facility in energy rebates to help fund various energy reduction projects. So Mark, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Great, thank you, Bruce. I appreciate that. Thank you, folks, for joining today, and glad to see everybody out there. Over 160 folks. That's wonderful. Just a little bit about the Volvo Group and who we are, what we do. Most people relate us to the Volvo cars, which we're no longer actually part of. The Volvo Group has over 100,000 employees and over 190 markets, with production facilities in 18 countries. So we are the world's leading manufacturer of trucks, buses, construction equipment, and marine and industrial engines. Next slide. So one of our goals is driving prosperity in all aspects of the world. As you can see, it means that we can impact the environment and the usage of our limited resources, and they're also considered in all the activities that we do, which is part of that circular economy that Bruce is talking about there. Next slide. Go ahead, next slide, please. There we go. So as you can see here, our environmental journey all the way back to 2003 here in North America, you'll note that we have started the process with our ISO 14001 and moved steadily through getting into the energy management side of things with ISO 50001. We have made great strides when it comes to wastewater recycling, to moving into landfill free, working with DOE on many of the projects and many of the reductions that we have here. Go ahead, next slide, please. moving forward from 2014 until currently, as you can see, we have worked closer with DOE, with the Better Buildings, Better Plants program, also with the WWF. Many of our facilities here in North America have begun and achieved the landfill-free certification journey, which we're very proud of. Also with Hagerstown, we are looking to recertify this year for our 3rd platinum level for our ISO 50001 SEP certification. Notably also, we have also achieved our 6-year goal with our WWF commitment to reduce 13,487 megawatt hours worth of energy consumption here at the facility. So we have reached that, and that will be, I think the 6-year period closes out at the end of 2020. So the Volvo group continues to add towards that commitment on a global basis. Next slide, please. So this right here is just a quick overview of where we are with the Department of Energy's Better Plants program. As you can see, we've made some great strides by committing to that 25% reduction over the 10-year period. We were able to meet that early with our first program that we signed up for. And then, of course, the reward for hard work is more hard work. So we signed up for another 25% in 10 years. So as you can see, we're also tracking very well towards that. Next slide, please. As far as renewable energy, most of the facilities that we have here in North America, as you can see, are working towards getting more renewable energy when it comes to solar panel installations. Fortunately, here at Hagerstown, we do have 2 systems in place. One is our parking lot canopy on the north side of the plant with the 1.3 megawatts, and also a ground mount installation on the back end of the plant that is 2.2 megawatts. So as we continue on, we do continue to make investments to look for more opportunities for renewable energy here at our site and other sites throughout North America. Next slide. So some of our landfill-free facilities, our New River Valley operations became the first to receive the Volvo Group landfill-free certification in 2018. The New River Valley site is where the Volvo trucks are actually assembled and produced. Lehigh Valley operations was also certified landfill-free in 2019. That is where the Mack trucks are assembled and delivered from, as well as our Middletown remanufacturing operations was also certified as landfill free in 2019. Last year in 2019, here at Hagerstown, we began our landfill free certification journey, which is a 12-month journey, and we are monitoring that and hoping to be able to close that up sometime in Q4 of this year. Next slide. So look, just to show you a little bit about what we actually perform here or build here at the facility, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So as you can see here, we produce the axles, the rear axles, as well as the engines and transmissions for the Mack trucks. These are the large over-the-road trucks that you will see out on the highway. For the Volvo trucks in North America, we produce as you can see, the 11 and 13 liter engines, as well as the transmissions. Now for the Prevost and Volvo buses, we produce engines and transmissions for those as well. We do machining here of crankshafts and camshafts and all of the gear components that go into these transmissions and engines, as well as performing testing, the painting operations of these engines, and we do research and development. Next slide, please. So our customers at this facility here, as I stated earlier, Mack trucks up in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, is where those they take and install the engines, transmissions, and axles that we produce here into the Mack trucks. Also in Volvo trucks in New River Valley, down in Dublin, Virginia, is where those are installed into the Volvo trucks. Volvo buses in Mexico City, and Prevost is in St. Clair, Canada, as well as Plattsburgh, New York. Next slide. So again, just to restate, we are a very unique campus here. The fact of that we do have our technology side of things to where we are researching and developing the next generation of engines and transmissions for the Volvo trucks, the Mack trucks, as well as the Prevost and Volvo buses and motor coaches. Next slide. Now to move on to landfill free. Volvo Group has basically established our definition as as many industrial facilities and other places have, that our landfill-free definition is going to be where less than 1% of our material ultimately goes to the landfill as the final disposal. Now, this is production waste that we have here. Generally, the 1% can only occur when those residual materials cannot be recycled or treated or managed in any other way. It's basically a last resort. Now, this does not apply to any type of construction and demolition debris, so it is not subject to that 1%. It is only the normal daily production waste that we have. So sometimes if we do make strides also when it comes to construction and demolition to always recycle when possible and to avoid landfills if at all possible when it comes to that. Next slide, please. So historically, when facilities, especially large industrial facilities, want to go down the landfill-free path, the natural progression or the natural way here in the United States has always been to go to waste to energy, which is essentially to where you were taking your plant trash and you were sending it to a waste to energy facility where they're going to take this trash, they're going to put it into a large area where they're going to burn this. They are going to generate heat, which then is going to generate steam, run a turbine. You're going to generate electricity off of it. One of the drawbacks to that is many times in these waste to energy facilities, there is still fuel that has to be used to ensure that this waste is able to generate the proper amount of BTUs to be able to create the steam, to be able to create the electricity ultimately. So you are still burning these fossil fuels to be able to do this. So Hagerstown did explore the waste to energy option, but due to the high costs and some other developments that we had in our particular area, we chose to go the route of the solid recovered fuel to get our plant to the landfill free to our destination. Next slide, please. So just to take a look at how we manage our wastes here, kind of I'll work from the right to the left here. So our used oil, wood pallets, cardboard, and of course our scrap metal, whether it be bulk steel or the turnings here from our operations, of course are recycled. As far as our hazardous and non-hazardous wastes, such as our manifested waste, if you will, or drummed wastes, those are actually sent out for incineration and or energy recovery when it comes to how we manage those RCRA type wastes. Looking at our general site or plant trash, if you will, again, switching from the landfill, going to the facility in Sorga that we use here locally, we were able to achieve the solid recovered fuel. Now, we'll get into a little bit about what that is. If you were present during the last summit that we had in presentation that Volvo did, we talked a little bit about our total waste elimination program, to where we focused on not only our trash and waste, but we also focused on our recyclable items as being just as detrimental to the facility here as basic trash. And the fact that we would attack any material that came into our facility that left that was not an engine, transmission, or an axle, because to us, that is a waste. That is something we have paid for, and now we're having to pay to manage it again out the door. So anything that we can is either going to be recycled or it's going to go to the solid recovered fuel. And it is our goal to always be looking and saying, what can we eliminate? Next slide, please. So solid recovered fuel, just as an overview, it basically utilizes a mechanical and a biological treatment to convert your waste into an EPA recognized alternative renewable fuel called SRF, solid recovered fuel. The good part about this is it does not combust the waste in any way during this manufacturing process. It uses the combination, as we will see, of automated sorting equipment, some enhanced biological composting, and mechanical refinement. Next slide, please. Okay, go ahead and hit that again. We've got a little bit of animation here we got to work through. So in the SRF process, as you will see, first is the mechanical pre-screening. Our material is delivered to the Consortium facility where it is dumped into a large pit where some basic sorting can be done when it's dumped onto the tipping floor to see and make sure that we don't have any gross contamination in those particular loads. You can go ahead and hit the next slide. It goes through a refinement process, next slide, to where they start to sort out a lot of the obviously recyclable materials. A lot of the metal is pulled out. Any big bulk items, whether it be wood or whatnot, is pulled out in this process. Next. From there, the material is transferred and goes into the biological treatment side of things. Next. To where it is picked up after the sorting and placed onto this bio-oxidation hull. If you will note, in the floor there, that is concrete, but there are slats or slits cut into the concrete there that allows for oxygen to be drawn down through the waste material that is sitting in this very large pit to be able to speed and help that oxidation process. Go ahead, next slide, please. Here are the biofilters that are outside of the facility. This is right here is mulch that is placed into it, and you can see the various fans there on the left, next slide, that are actually helping to pull and filter this air that is drawn off of the material that basically eliminates all of the odor that you will encounter on the outside of this building. Next slide. So then becomes the mechanical refinement and sorting that occurs to where they're going to continue to shred this material, to do refinement sorting, pull out any metals that may have missed through the initial sorting process. Next. So there's various stages, whether it be the shredding portion, whether it be the continuous drying of it, also where it becomes into the right sizing of the material. Next slide, please. Here's the loadout. So here becomes the material being deposited into these 100 cubic yard walking floor trailers that will ultimately be delivered to a customer. Next slide. This right here is an example. This is a picture of our waste material once it has been, it has gone through this, the mechanical process, the biological process, the refinement, the shredding, and the drying. This particular material basically has really no odor to it. It's almost like fluff, if you will. It can be turned into fuel pellets, but they choose to actually run this loose. Next slide, please. So some of the benefits then for SRF is basically that our plant trash is now turned into a product that will ultimately be sold. Okay, so before it would be something that would be sent to a waste to-energy facility, and it just simply goes right into it. It is incinerated to the point that we get the BTU values. Boom, we have steam. We generate electricity, and it's done. This right here is almost turned into a product or a commodity now that can be shipped either a couple miles down the road, or it can be shipped hundreds of miles down the road as a product that we're selling to somebody, or they are selling to someone. The good point is that the high calorific value of this, 1 toll of coal is equal to approximately 1.5 tons of this SRF. So next point. So when you're marketing this SRF, you're marketing it to industrial users that are currently using these fossil fuels. So cement industry, lime kilns, steel mills, for example. So when you have a facility that, let's say, is using coal to fire their kilns there to create their products, such as in the cement industry, which is exactly where our material goes. It goes to this particular cement kiln, and they cannot purchase enough of this material. They cannot produce enough of this material to feed this particular cement kiln because they are consuming so much material all the time to produce the cement that they have there. So the benefit of that is that we are no longer using, or they are no longer using coal to fire this. Normally, this material would have either went to waste to energy or it would have went to the landfill. So you're able to basically offset the use of that coal there at that facility. Next slide. So I guess if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Thanks so much, Mark. And actually, we're going to hold questions until the very end for both our panelists. However, we've gotten a lot in on Slido, which is great. I'm combining it and writing them down, so we'll be good to go. Wonderful. Mark, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your insights there and, of course, the perspective from the industrial side. Next up, we have Bill Whitfield. Bill of Shorenstein, which is a commercial real estate company, and he is responsible for managing and overseeing the company's sustainability program and is also general manager of the Rust building where Shorenstein's corporate offices are located. So Bill, go ahead and take it away. We'd love to hear more. Bill, I think you might be on mute.
The first of many faux pas you will see as I go through my presentation. It was great to hear Mark's presentation because I see you did a great job of some different perspectives here, because I'll be talking about a whole different angle about our waste management and what we do and how we do it. And it's obviously not industrial. It's really much more with how talking about how I interact with people and try to get them to participate in the program so that we can be better recyclers. I also, let's see, I may mention a few basics that I see you guys, we've got a pretty astute audience here that already knows all about diversion rates and stuff, but I still may mention a few basics for those who don't as I go through things, because that really is kind of the point of when I'm trying to get participation in this program of reducing our waste, is really teaching, you know, people from knowing nothing about recycling and how to deal with their waste to try to become active participants in the program. So next slide. So 10 things I'm going to talk about, just kind of shoot for some different topics here, is what we do at Shorenstein. I'll tell you who we are and what we do in a moment. How we do it, waste reduction, composting as a specific item. It's important, more important than you would think in the office building setting. Messaging, which is kind of the core about everything I'm going to talk about today, is how to get the information and the knowledge of how to participate out to the audience that I'm dealing with. Sustainability as a larger picture above and around waste management and recycling. Shorenstein successes. And then at the end, I will do a little bit of ranting, although I was happy the first poll you did today, everybody has a lot of the same issues I have, so you'll just hear me rant about them for a minute too, because they are sometimes stumbling blocks in our success. And then I'll say thanks for having me. So next slide. So I promise this will probably be the only little cutesy cartoon I have, but I always like to start whatever presentations I do about recycling and sustainability with this. It is the simplest concept. It really says it in a way which is all that we are doing in the end is trying not to do something now that's going to come around and bite us in the ass later. I mean, it's the whole concept of recycling and sustainability and kind of the core of what I'm thinking while I'm passing on all the information I pass on. Shorenstein is owner and manager of office properties across the nation. We're generally in major markets. So what that leaves me with, as far as the audience I'm dealing with on recycling, is my corporate entity, the offices where I work, and the employees that are there in the corporate office running the company. I have to deal with the building teams that are out in each building, managing each building, Shorenstein employees. And then the largest group I think that we have to deal with, of course, in sheer quantity, is the actual tenants, and trying to impart the wisdom to them of how to participate in our recycling program and how important it is for us to see better statistics when it comes to waste management for our buildings. There's a touch of retail in some of our buildings, and of course that is only interesting in that it is our one link to the public, which is a whole other situation in trying to get people to participate in recycling programs when they're just stopping by for a minute. But the retail and that aspect create a lot of waste that we have to figure out what to do with, or impact the waste that leaves the buildings a lot. So it is worth mentioning. The other thing about, you can probably go to the next slide. The other thing we is worth mentioning is that our corporate headquarters are based in San Francisco, California. And when I Google recycling San Francisco, it gets credit for being a very advanced city. And I think it's great that we're located there and that I can work so closely with them in taking some of the mandates that they do and trying to send it across to our other major markets and our buildings. So what we do at Shorenstein. I'm really just going to kind of talk about the stuff and list it because as at the beginning of the program here, you put the link up. The Better Buildings group was kind enough to do a, what's it called, the spotlight on us and put up many of the programs and policies for you to take a look at if you want to explore them more. But I will tell you what we do, which is, and why I think our program is kind of doing well and successful are these reasons. Employee sustainability training. So first of all, the great thing about, for me, about my company is that I don't have to convince my executives and my corporate entities that recycling and sustainability is important. It's kind of already embedded in our company. So it's great that I have free reign to go do what I need to do to get everybody else on board and not try to convince my own company that this is important. They seem to have that as a core component of the way we operate. And so that I think shows in our employee sustainability training, which starts as a new hire. You are amongst your first day of training, sustainability is mentioned and taught, and recycling and the importance of it is explained. That training is also ongoing after you've worked for a while. The sustainability program, which is myself and Kelly, spend a good 3 hours over 3 sessions with every new employee, teaching them about the sustainability program and what our expectations are, and kind of just instilling that it's just kind of a core value. We have our policies. I think those are listed on the website, so I don't need to go through detail them too much, but there are 4 main policies, and I love policies because they're really rules and guidelines. If you work here, you better do, you better stick with what we're saying here in our policy. We have an overarching kind of sustainability policy, expecting everyone to participate with our objectives and our targets related to energy, greenhouse gas emissions, water, waste, indoor air quality, and the need to provide tools, leadership, and communication to our tenants. Energy Star is its own policy. Our commitment to having every property fully involved in Energy Star is very important. It's very important to the success of our program for waste management and energy use and everything. I'm sure our audience out here is very familiar with Portfolio Manager and Energy Star, but it is a fantastic tool and a requirement for all our properties to participate in and hopefully become Energy Star certified. We have a waste policy. Clearly that's what we're here to talk about today, and that policy really just states that you will implement a waste management program at your building that either meets Shorenstein's standards or your jurisdictional standards, whichever is more stringent. So be as mindful as possible in dealing with the waste that leaves the building. And then a tenant engagement policy. And that, of course, is that we expect all of our property teams to engage tenants and to support them in every way to make waste and recycling and anything sustainability related a priority. We have our goals, of course. There's 4 simple goals that we are all striving to meet in the company and using as a tool to motivate people to meet them. I'm sure, again, most of our audience members are familiar with basic goals. We have a waste reduction, water reduction, greenhouse gas reduction goal, and I've missed the other one, the 4th one, water, waste, you know, we got goals. point is, we got goals. Excuse me for talking quickly, because I don't want to waste people's time, so I'm kind of powering through my presentation. We collect data monthly, again, that not only through Energy Star, but in every way. In many ways, we are making sure we're monitoring what each building is doing. We also collect data from a quarterly perspective. We take the data that we collect monthly, and our business information team helps me make a really nice presentation of that data, which is the key tool in motivating the properties to be involved in everything we do sustainability-wise. That quarterly report gives all the buildings a comparison to how they're doing relative to the other buildings, and it also gives them a perspective of how they're doing, if there's any trends that we're seeing or problem areas. So it's a real great tool to look at and see where we need to spend some time and where I need to support properties as needed. We have a pretty robust recycling training program. Specifically, recycling is kind of my particular passion, so I'm proud of that program. Again, you can see that online, but one I was involved with is a really great tool, and it's produced in such a way that it's a useful tool for employees and tenants and anybody who wants to watch it, as far as how to participate in recycling in an office building. And it's interactive, so it allows the person viewing the recycling online to dig deeper into topics and issues and questions that they have, as well as it asks you questions to make sure you kind of learned what you needed to learn. We do in-person training. We provide that. I love to do a recycling, inspirational recycling training whenever I can. It's a training program that is available, you know, kind of as a PowerPoint. It's customizable because each building, you know, sometimes has its own way of dealing with recycling or community. And then we have other forms of support, like our brochures. We provide all our buildings with a customizable brochure so that they have something when a tenant moves in to hand them and say, here's our program, and here's how it works, and here's how you are expected to participate. We allow our property teams to support the tenants in any way that they need to make sure that they participate in the recycling program. So if a tenant, we don't want to give a tenant any excuse not to, you know, participate. If they need bins, we'll provide the bins. If they need signage, we will help participate and provide that signage. And we have a specific online website at each building that a tenant can go to that provides how recycling works in that building and how they can participate, and sustainability in the larger picture. And then our annual trash audits. I expect every building to do a actual audit of their trash annually. This kind of course, verifies what's actually going on, kind of verifies the diversion rate, and you can go to the next slide, and is a useful tool for us in making sure we're doing what we're doing. So don't let this slide share you. It was interesting to make. I was basically asked to do a presentation to my executives and property managers about what sustainability is at Shorenstein, and it was supposed to be a simple flow chart saying here's what we do, and it got a little complicated, but the story is very simple that it tells, which is that, you know, from the building, we basically, the program, in a nutshell, collects information, reports that information to the appropriate agencies and local jurisdictions and wherever it is required to report, tries to get and receive as much recognition for that, that information that we collect, with all the certifications and programs that we can be involved in. And the key that I learned from this is how to get that information and bring it right back here to the beginning so that it gives the appropriate tools to the buildings to improve on the data that they put out. What stood out for me in this particular drawing was how important property management engagement, which is something that we're going to focus on more, is to the success of a recycling program or any kind of you know, environmental program in the building. It kind of needs the enthusiastic support of a person in order to pass that on to the tenants. Just passing something on if you really don't care about it doesn't do as well as becoming motivated to do so. So I'm working on that as our what we're doing next kind of approach. Next slide. So a lot of what I think I went through my list and said that I was going to talk about messaging. A lot of what makes our program successful, or the only way that we can see improvement in our waste program is by messaging to the tenants the right way. All the training and education is, I'm constantly thinking about how I'm going to get this information to them. And one of the things is, I think that recycling is the gateway into sustainability as a larger thing. But so that they're all willing to say, okay, how do I recycle? But the training immediately covers much more than just the actual recycling part. Of course, we've all heard reduce, reuse, recycle, but it is just so important to emphasize to everybody that that waste management starts with trying to consider everything that you potentially bring into the building or that you produce. If you can reduce what you get, you obviously are going to have less that you need to deal with at the end. And then, of course, of those things, how many of those are one-use items? Is there any way to try to view everything you utilize and do in your workday to be reusable? Obviously, the one that comes to mind is why a paper coffee cup when you can have an actual mug? You're only in your office, it's there sitting, you know, it's around you all the time. The coffee place is right down the street. Why don't you just bring a reusable mug instead of paper cups? That type of idea. So concept of this is just that it's a lot bigger than just simply recycling. And then when we get to recycling, all this, if you have to do something with it, it is sorting is the key to recycling. That is the message that I send. Anything put in a pile of only itself can probably be recycled, and it's just the fact that it gets all mishmashed and has to be separated somewhere else or dealt with in another way that makes recycling not as effective. I also, of course, came up with one more word starting with an R, but it really is compost. You can go to the next slide, because composting is far more important than the average office worker thinks, especially even in an office building. If I had an office building, or we acquired one and they had absolutely no waste management program, the first thing that we would like to make the most effort to implement would be composting, because it really can change your diversion rate from 0 to, you know, up to 50, 60% immediately. It is surprising how some tenants, you know, are kind of scared of composting. Like they think these things, these myths about flies or bugs or smells. It's the same stuff that's already in your office. I'm just asking you to put it in a different colored bin, and we'll take it from there. So we try to put a big emphasis on our recycling program. Next slide. This slide is basically about messaging, and I'm so glad to hear Mark speak, give me such inspiring information about landfill. But when I message information to the tenants about why they need to recycle, a lot of them just want to know, a lot of training may just say, put this in this bin and put this in this bin, and really not tell them why. And I think it's super important that you're never going to, instead of just memorizing what goes into what bin, understanding why you're dividing it into the way that you're dividing it. And that starts with understanding some of the bad news, which is why landfill is bad, and what a diversion rate is. And you know, it's kind of, the story is told very nicely in this slide, which is that if you diverted all the stuff in this landfill breakdown, you only end up with 14% of the landfill that you would have otherwise had. And that way you're not burying recycling to never be seen again, and burying paper or compost, which both can be composted if you wanted, which could be used in a more valuable way, all if you participate in our sorting program from the source. Of course, I don't think I need to rant to this audience too much about this, but you know, there are a list of reasons why landfill is bad, and I kind of start my training with tenants on that, with that message. Next slide. Sustainability in the bigger picture. Another thing we try to impart to all those who we want to participate in our waste management program is that there's a connection. I find that some people don't even realize why they're recycling. It's just the right thing to do. But not long ago, it was inappropriate for me to talk about climate change or greenhouse gas emissions. It was kind of politicized. But I have definitely started trying to make that link for everybody that I'm trying to get on board with our recycling program, that, you know, the easiest, the most involved thing you can do, the way that you can be most involved in creating an earth that won't have a climate change and pollution is by recycling. It's the one thing that you can do as an individual that and I try to associate the link of how that plays out to, by doing this, you're really doing your part to reduce greenhouse gases. And I explain the slightly scientific connection there, which this group understands quite well. Next slide. So in a nutshell, our successes, which I think is why I was supposed to kind of come here and talk at Shorenstein, are simply that we have a really robust, well, I want to start with something that's not even here, which is that our corporate commitment to, if you're in our building, you will participate in our recycling program is a real success, because, and tenants like it. They like to be, you know, clearly directed on how to do the best thing they can do as far as recycling. We have robust programs in place, which I discussed some of those already. We have our policies, which I went over. Our individual statistics, again, I'll proudly state that this is a picture of the Rust Building in San Francisco. The Rust Building maintains an 87% diversion rate. I think you all know what diversion rates are, but that is how much of the waste that leaves the building is diverted away from landfill. So the fact that we have a very small percentage of what leaves the Rust Building goes to landfill is impressive. Portfolio wide, we're up above 50%. Thank you very much, Better Buildings, for helping me figure all that out. But that's not bad too when you average it all out across the portfolio, that knowing that you know, half of what would otherwise have gone to landfill is diverted due to the efforts that we do in our buildings. And then success is the Better Buildings Waste Pilot. To be asked to be in that program and to be asked to talk, to me, is a real honor. So thank you very much. Next slide. Oh, we made it to the ranting part, haven't we? I was happy to hear that it's not just me. Already in this program today, many of these things that drive me nuts and make it difficult and are in some ways stumbling blocks to succeeding, the rest of you know about it too. So that's pretty fantastic. But statistics, a diversion rate is a tough statistic. I have to teach people what it means prior to actually, achieving it. And of course, it is the diversion of your waste from a landfill in general. So that's always tough. It would be great if there were some better ways of measuring or different ways of looking at things. I think one of the issues is that it doesn't account to how much trash we make. It just accounts to how much of it we divert, which takes me to root causes. I think that just like energy, these days we're starting to say thank you for reducing energy each building, but we also need to look at where the energy we are using is coming from. That's almost just as important, if not more important, to that. If it's from renewable sources, it really is a more effective way of looking at your energy use than just reducing what you use. Same thing with trash. Try to look at not just let's be good recyclers, but let's look at the bigger picture of seeing if we can reduce the amount of trash we use in the first place. National guidelines, it is very difficult having 80 to 100 buildings across the nation and having every one of them have kind of different guidelines in their communities. So if there were some sort of across the nation perspective on the right way of good recycling and managing your waste, that would be fantastic. Initial responsibility, which is really what is talked about a lot, and hopefully we'll see some progress on, but it's kind of like if somebody sells a product, it would be great if they were responsible for the end life of that product as well. That would really be a fantastic thing. And I think as an example, Amazon, they deliver a box to your door and then the empty truck goes back to the warehouse every night. Why wouldn't we want to put the empty box from the other delivery out front so that they leave your new box and take your old box? I think that in the end, it would be, as Mark taught me, it's financially wise if companies can deal with their own waste, and it also makes them think of better ways of doing things. I'm sure if we did that with Amazon, you would find that there'd suddenly be reusable boxes that they'd just use over and over, rather than the fact that they'd have to take back the other box. Plastics. Thank you, Bruce. I was so excited to hear that there is a conversation going on and efforts about plastics. Plastics drive me nuts. Don't even get me started. There are so many plastics in the world, and there's so many better ways of doing things. It's essentially over-packaging. So that is something that drives me nuts. People's behaviors, of course, that's what I'm dealing with in general. I'm trying to teach people how to be better recyclers. It is interesting to me that some people go to the sorting bins with their item and say, I don't know, so I'm gonna put it in the landfill item, which is probably, you know, it's like, that's the worst choice. You could have put it in the recycling item where it's gonna go get, bin where it's gonna go get sorted. And then education. Recycling really needs to be taught to children. I think it is, and I think it was, and I think we've kind of lost it because I'm finding some of my millennial tenants right now aren't as pro recycling as I would expect them to be. And to me, they're the kids these days, but they're a little bit more do it for me than how do I do it. But that's me ranting. Next slide. And good, that cuts me off from ranting, but thank you very much for listening. How did I do on time? I hope I didn't talk too quickly.
That was.
But I want to mostly, again, thank, you know, I'm recycling is my passion. I really love to teach it and be involved in it and do as good as I can. So I want to thank all of you folks whose numbers I see down here for listening to this, because that really means that you're all just as passionate as me. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bill. I really appreciate that. And also, of course, hearing from these different perspectives and sectors and also the way you're approaching it. I'm excited that we have about 20 minutes for some Q&A. I see that we already have about 30 questions in the lineup, which is great, but it's not too late to contribute your own. Again, if you go to slido.com, the hashtag BB Summit is your event code, and then you're going to choose the early best practices from the drop down. I've tried, as our questions are coming in, I've been trying to kind of combine the ones that are similar and pick out what seem to be the hot topics. So I'm going to start with a question back over to you, Mark. One of the hot topics people seem to pick up on from your chat was this idea of the landfill-free certification. I know you spoke a little bit about it and its definition being less than 1% of going to landfill. But is that something that's a third-party certification, or is that something that's internal? And if you could just tell us a little bit more about that, that'd be great.
Sure, absolutely. And actually, great question. The certification that we speak of is more or less an internal certification for ourselves. So it's something that was established by the Volvo Group, Volvo AB, out of Sweden. We worked with all of our sites to come up with, you know, what our internal definition would be on this and how we would apply it to ourselves. So each individual company, I think, would need to understand what their definition of that is going to be. You know, some could be a lot looser than the 1%. So as far as, is there an actual sanctioning body out there that could give you a certification, you know, official one, kind of like we do with ISO right now? Not that I'm aware of. I don't think that there is anything out there. So yeah, so, you know, with the 1%, just to kind of restate and clarify a little bit on that also, something I failed to say was that was 1% of the residual going to there, but also one thing that did not count towards that would be any type of beneficial reuse. A lot of times with materials that you have that cannot be recycled, they cannot be readily burned for their or incinerated for their BTU value, can be used such as for alternate daily cover at a landfill. So in lieu of using dirt to cover, the waste at the end of the day, a lot of these landfills will take this unrecyclable material and use that as their alternate daily cover. So something like that would not qualify as, going towards that 1%. But yeah, good question.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much, Mark. And then I'll also just mention this about our Q&A is that we do have so many questions, and I know that so many of our pilot participants are on the line. So particularly for our pilot participants, if there's a question that you also feel like you could contribute to, there's a reply button under each question. So I know we've had a couple about, for instance, healthcare. So if there's any other healthcare partners online, you can go ahead and reply to that person directly, since we won't be able to get to all of these. Excellent. So my next question is one that came up here, and is, of course, a big topic of conversation across the globe right now. And it's basically, how has COVID impacted your waste streams, if at all, and in particular with things like, single-use or disposable packaging? I know that's something that maybe we don't know the answers yet of how that's been impacted, but if either of you could weigh in or make a guess, we're happy to hear it.
I can't imagine it's good. There's been a lot of disposable. It's been promoted greatly. Disposable, just it's producing a lot of stuff. So that can't be good. I have not noticed it in our waste stream yet, because in all honesty, we haven't seen the return to our buildings that we are expecting to see soon. I think larger tenants are spending even more time away. In preparation for that, I have provided a new bin, a red bin, for, which is technically hazardous waste, but which is a place that everybody can feel that they can put their stuff in. We can deal with it in a more careful manner. I do, however, think it's going to end up in landfill. That's the ultimate path for that bin in our building. One quick story I was going to tell in my rant. Sorry to bore you guys again or take the stage, but I went to, Safeway is now, my supermarket is not allowing to bring in your reusable totes and bags. I guess they feel that there's some sort of contamination issue with that. And one day, after waiting in line and wearing the mask and doing everything, they had run out of their disposable bags to provide any way of carrying your groceries. So I had to load all the groceries back up into the cart and then bring them out to my car and put them in the trunk. And then I got home and I got a box and carried them in. And I was thinking, this is kind of great. I don't know why we need bags at all. It just seems like changing the behavior of just having to have a bag is kind of dumb. It was not hard at all to deal with no bags.
Great. Mark, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, actually, one thing I will say is with the COVID and especially on the EH&S side of things, with our health and safety folks, our team out of Greensboro that, put in some obscene hours trying to prep and plan for this COVID response when we return to the factory to continue building. Those guys were really thinking through a lot of the things too when it came to the logistics sides of things, to understand that, we were in good shape on a lot of stuff when it came to, certain containers. It's a 5-week lead time for us to get parts from Sweden. Okay. So, and for 5 weeks, these parts stay on a container ship. Well, that's great. But then the question arises is, okay, so with a lot of our emballage containers, our reusable containers that we have, where do we get to the point to where, who was the last person to touch this? What do we do? What the good part about that is it calls people to start thinking about, where did this part come from? Where did this piece come from? Where did this box come from? Why do I have a box? What happens to this box now? So inadvertently, a lot of people on the manufacturing floor, kind of going back to what was said earlier, it allows these folks to be able to question and see and realize, wow, I never really paid attention to how many bags, this part, came in, how many parts were in this box, and why do we have bags, and why do we have all this, and what do I do with this, and who touched it? So it lends itself to be able to expand that knowledge of, this is why we try to get rid of all the materials that are here. And it does challenge the things also to sit there and say, okay, is there a better way to do this because of the COVID? What can we do to reduce these touches, reduce these potentials for having areas of contamination? So I think it's actually been a beneficial thing, you know, that, you know, to be able to address some of these issues and kind of bring them up to the forefront. And maybe some people can now kick out some ideas of how they would solve these solutions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Mark, we have another just quick question for you, which is that someone was wondering whether you count scrap steel in your recycling rate or how that's counted.
Scrap steel is actually counted two different ways. First, we have our recycling numbers with and without scrap metal. Then we further break scrap metal down a little bit differently, because recycling of scrap metal is more so based off of our process, because it's a natural process that we have. So we kind of look at our general recycling when it comes to our cardboard, when it comes to our pallets, when it comes to our any kind of plastics and that kind of stuff. That is the number that we focus on for our KPI, for our key performance indicator. How well we're doing, are we increasing, are we reducing, based off of that. Any of the scrap metal recycling that we do, we are basically going to focus on in a different way, to where we have recycling based off of production volumes. We know how much recycling should come off of a crankshaft, off of a camshaft, off of any other gear machining, shaft machining that we do when it comes to transmissions. But we also look for a breakdown when it comes to the cost of poor quality. So sometimes you might have a month and it's like, hey, this is great. You know, we increased our metal recycling by 20%. The question is, okay, how much did volumes go up? Well, they didn't. Well, that could be cost of poor quality, to where if we scrapped out parts, that's bad. It could be that we actually got rid of some machinery, you know, and then we scrapped out machinery, brought in new stuff. Well, you have to account for that to understand those ebbs and flows of your recycling. Where does that come from? A lot of times you can take a look at the projects and see to where, especially with our KRI reporting and whatnot, we have to look at how much material we remove from a blank of steel to make a crankshaft or a camshaft or whatnot. So there's opportunities there to see how can we lower that recycling number, but yet see an actual improvement, because we now, you know, do not have to remove as much metal from a piece of equipment or a piece of meat to make a product. Therefore, we're more efficient when it comes to that. So we do break our recycling down multiple ways.
Great, thank you. Clearly that person was aware of some of those intricacies, so that's wonderful. Thanks so much, Mark. Bill, we have a couple of questions, of course, around engagement for you. So the first one is, if you could provide just a brief general outline of what the 3 one-hour sessions to new employees cover, and specifically if it's just recycling or if it's more waste streams.
It's actually sustainability in the larger picture that we cover that in our new employee training. Yeah, we have a sustainability kind of how-to book at Shorenstein. So we just a little bit go over what you all had to sit through for me just now. We teach a new employee everything that we feel is a strong commitment on our company's part to ensure that, you know, everybody's just kind of understands our sustainability program. We leave them to go come back another time after they've gone through the book, and then we kind of chat about questions and concepts that the book provided them. So it's a PowerPoint presentation that covers that, and I have to say it doesn't deep dive into recycling in that new employee training as much as the recycling trainings that I do separately.
And is that something that you've partnered with human resources on in order to be able to reach those new employees? Yes,
Shorenstein, well, HR is cooperative and involved, but luckily our property management and construction group has a really robust training manager and team that helps us develop these training programs and almost does it for us. I guess we help them. So it's just a real big, training in general is a real big support to all our buildings that Shorenstein provides from the corporate offices.
And we've got one more question that's related to that engagement, and then I'm actually going to bring up a poll about engagement to our audience because I'm curious their input on this. But so Bill, for you, you also mentioned with some requirements and some policies that you all have. Is that something that you include in leases? How are those enforced or strongly suggested?
No, they're really in the employee handbook. We just have a lot of policies that are available, and often you find yourself, you know, just referring to them and pointing to them through the other training, to the policies, through the other trainings and interactions you have with employees. They're not for tenants, they're just for, you know, an internal policy for employees. There was kind of a second part to that question I wanted to touch on. What was the question again?
Essentially, so it was if it's in leases and how those policies may be enforced.
Yes, so our leases, although we have changed our language a little bit, it could be a lot more robust. In our leases, we have an attachment called building rules. So that is different for each building. So we encourage each property to have tenant must participate in our recycling program as a building rule rather than having incorporated it into the body of the lease. But we're recognized for being a green lease leader. So our leases are in some way green.
I'm glad you pitched the program. I didn't have to. Excellent. Thanks so much. So as you can see, we've launched this poll about how effective do you feel your signage and occupant engagement efforts are. This is something we hear a lot about from partners. And I also, of course, encourage you all to also check out the solution that Shorenstein works with Better Buildings on. Looks like about 40% feel like it's, okay, the numbers are a little bit out of order, so I'm reading this, that most people feel like it's decently well effective, if you will. So that's interesting to know, and I hope that if you've answered, you feel like they're effective, and you're a partner of ours, I do hope you'll reach out to me and my emails at the end because we'd love to share some of those resources and hear from you. Excellent, thank you so much. All right, we can go ahead and I think and take that poll down, and we're going to bounce over to the other big hot topic for Mark. Your solid recovery fuel, of course, is a big part of your presentation and generated a lot of questions and interest. So just a couple of questions for more detail on there. One question was, can a solid recovery fuel be used on site, such as replacing natural gas? Is that something you've considered?
That could be a possibility here. As far as here at Volvo, our natural gas consumption primarily revolves around our boilers, as well as some of our process equipment when it comes to our heat treating, our heat treat department. So the quality of that natural gas, you know, also has a lot to do with you know, what we're purchasing, you know, how well it works. We also do a lot of we create atmospheres here when it comes to carburizing our parts. So that natural gas is critical to that operation. This particular facility, again, just to talk about this specific one in Sorga that produces this SRF, they have a customer right down the road from them that will purchase every ton, every pound that they can generate. So their capacity, they are going as hard as they can and still cannot feed their only customer with enough material. So as far as using it on site, is that something that would be, you know, thought about down the road? Absolutely. We would just have to try and find the right scenario to be able to use that, because right now, primarily our fuel consumption is either going to be natural gas in those items I talked about, or B, it's going to be diesel fuel.
Excellent, thank you. And so when you were looking at that process or evaluating it, particularly in comparison to waste to energy, was there a cost advantage or an emissions or pollution advantage that you all identified?
So cost-wise, it was a little more expensive to go with the solid recovered fuel. So what we were able to do is we were able to put into place some additional, I guess, efficiencies, you know, to make some different changes so that we were able to offset it. Now, that's not going to be unique for everybody or possible for everyone. We ended up coming out about $800 and some more expensive per year, which in the grand scheme of things of what we're spending, you know, when it comes to our waste and energy budget in the millions of dollars, it was pretty incredible that we were able to do that. But again, this came with efficiencies when it comes to how do we transport, you know, are we using roll-off containers, are we using transfer trailers, are we using industrial compactors, or you know, what have you. So we were able to pull it all, but generally you may see a little bit of an increase when it comes to it. In the grand scheme of things, looking at our 2020, or I'm sorry, our 2030 plan and our 2050 plan for Volvo, you know, it looks to be, you know, where are we doing with our CO2 emissions? What are we doing with our going after the greenhouse gases? So it's a long-term plan that we have that just puts this into a better place, because what we're doing again is replacing that 1 ton of coal with the 1.5 tons of SRF.
Great, thank you so much, Mark. As I ask Bill our next question, if we could bring up a second poll, which is going to look at all of your considerations in the waste energy nexus. So while we're doing that, you know, Bill, it's of course really clear that we have different perspectives on the line here, and I know that so much of the work that you all do in waste is really set within your sustainability goals. So I was wondering more from an even like philosophical standpoint, you know, if there's something that's connected waste and energy to Shorenstein, whether that's a corporate sustainability, you know, plan or efforts, and how those might be kind of connected more philosophically, since you all are less involved in the literal connection.
Huh?
Basically what I'm asking is, I know that you all have your waste goals set within these larger sustainability goals.
Yes.
So are you considering your waste goals, you know, alongside your energy goals and energy efficiency goals, or those, you know, separate? Kind of philosophically, how is that?
Well, first of all, for me, the waste stands out in that it is truly the main way that a tenant can participate in the building. An individual tenant can participate. And we have a larger sustainability program. At one point, it was called our Flip the Switch program, training program that we provide tenants with. All the tenants that we can get to come listen to us. We're currently changing the name of that to our environmental responsibility training program to kind of speak to what you're asking, which is the bigger picture. And I have to say, it always, after giving the presentation, it always comes back to recycling for the tenants. That is the question and the thing that they want to know about and want to have a ton of questions about. So although it does, and obviously, you know, energy reduction is probably the more serious and impactful way that we can participate in being good environmental, you know, building operators. But but recycling is just super important as kind of the gateway into that larger picture.
Great. Well, thank you so much. For our last question here, if you could each just answer in 5 or 10 seconds, are you using any particular tools for the measurement side that you suggest to our other audience here?
I will just go back to Energy Star, which I'm sure everybody is already well familiar with. We've had other means of doing measuring and tried different kind of things, but it really all comes back to it's best to have everything all in one place and a beautiful system that is already there, and each building can participate in at their, you know, on their own.
Great, thank you.
So with Volvo here at our facility, of course, in Hagerstown, we manage all our own data and collect our own data when it comes to this. Now, all of this does get rolled up to a larger, I guess, collection or larger database when it comes to Volvo Group as a whole, because of those big corporate sustainability goals that we have. We do our sustainability data reporting really on a monthly basis. And that goes over everything from cost to energy use to waste, recycling, you know, how we're impacting the environment when it comes to our CO2 emissions and whatnot. So it is literally looked at on a monthly basis at Volvo Group as a whole, at all of our operations in all the countries.
Great, thank you all so much. Well, I know there were a lot of questions we weren't able to get to today, but I really appreciate, again, all of the insights from our panelists. I want to, of course, again, plug our Solution Center where you can check out the solutions from panelists today. And I know there were some questions on compost we didn't get to, and our quarterly call from our second quarter for the waste pilot does talk a little bit about food waste and compost. You can also check out that for an additional resource. Yeah, so thank you all so much again to our panelists, to everyone who joined us today. And I look forward to hopefully sharing some more results with you next year at the Better Building Summit.
Thank you all.